Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bridging the Gap, the podcast, BTG Pod, as I like to call it. I'm Gabriel Martinez Cabrera, the Executive Director at LCMC, and my guest, my co-host is...
And I'm Anthony Featherstone, Executive Director for WorkSource Montgomery.
This is a joint effort between two organizations that work in the Maryland area, in the Montgomery County specifically. LCMC is an adult education agency that serves over 2,500 students, all adults who are basic skills deficient. We serve them with educational and workforce readiness skills.
And WorkSource Montgomery is the county's lead workforce development agency. We operate our American Job Centers, and we serve local job seekers looking for employment and businesses looking to fill their talent needs.
And together, we are going to have our first joint effort and our first conversation with an amazing guest all the way from Savannah, Georgia. His name is Brent Stubbs, Dr. Brent Stubbs, I should say. Dr. Brent Stubbs, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you both. And it's exciting because my own work is about the convergence of really your two organizations' missions. And adult education is the place where economic development, you can really move that needle in workforce development. So excited to be with you today.
So, Brent, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do in Savannah, and then tell us, how did you get into this field of adult ed and workforce development, since you do, like you said, bridge both in your organization?
Sure. So I am the Vice President for Economic Development at Savannah Technical College. That includes adult education, continuing education, corporate education, as well as a whole host of grant programs. We are right now in the middle of training 500 returning citizens in the last 6 months of their sentence. We're implementing a micro-credentialing system. I'm just going to stop. It's going to sound like I don't sleep, which I probably don't. But how I got into adult education, and it's a real honor, and it was a backdoor. In fact, I was just having lunch with a group of people and sharing this story. I actually had started out in secondary ed, went into the business world, and felt that call back to education. Felt like, I had been using my talents for corporate America, and thought, I really could help really the communities where I came from. And I reached out, though, to a local technical college in Florida and asked if they had any business classes. And they said, we have GED classes to teach. They don't have the business classes. We have GED classes. And I said, sure. So I went and taught these GED classes, and then ended up teaching online. Went back into the K-12 classroom, still doing adult ed part-time, and then ended up moving into a leadership role in Florida. And the rest has really been history. I came to Savannah Tech 9 years ago as the Dean of Adult Education, then became the Dean of General Education, then the Vice President of Adult Education. And then 2.5 years ago, moved into my current role, where I work with business and industry every single day, and have really been excited and humbled by the chance to help educate them about the opportunities in adult education and our students as a tremendous part of the workforce system, but also to build training programs for our population and linking them to the opportunities that exist in our business community.
Yeah, that's great, Brent. Thanks for sharing. And I'll just jump right in. In workforce development, we hear the buzzword innovative and innovation a lot, but sometimes it's tough to figure out what that means. And we're doing something up here in Montgomery County. We're trying to introduce virtual reality. And thanks to you, we've connected on that level, and you've shared some resources. But you all are actually implementing VR training down in Savannah. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, it's so exciting, Anthony, and thank you for asking me about it. We have a challenge in a lot of industries where we have two problems. We have a misperception about what that industry looks like and feels like, and we have outdated ways of delivering the education that gets people into those industries. And so we are part of this innovation grant. We've actually deployed 250 virtual reality training units across the state of Georgia. Here in our community alone, we have 60 of those units. And literally right now, I've got 3 that aren't in use. We have 30 of these units inside a correctional facilities. And we're also serving out of school, at-risk youth. We have a program we ran with Rising. Our first pilot was actually with a group of 18-year-olds who really didn't have a path coming out of high school. And of those 7, 2 actually ended up getting jobs in one of the largest manufacturers in our region who, quote, doesn't hire 18-year-olds. And they hired 2 18-year-olds who are still gainfully employed today. 4 of the other students went on to more education in manufacturing. And what VR does, the VR training does, is it gives learners an opportunity to enter a world that would cost them the cost of transportation. We think about all the barriers to the things that really are a part of like an immersive learning experience. You know, creating that new horizon or that new perspective, a new paradigm, a new potential that students can think about themselves. What VR does is it allows them wherever they are, like right here, I could put on a VR headset and be transported into another world where I have a virtual coach who's gamifying the whole idea of learning. So inside these headsets around manufacturing, they're aligned to national standards or connected to things like the Certified Production Technician, Certified Logistics Associate, OSHA 10, OSHA 30. You know, really important skills and knowledge when you're wanting to make a transition. And in this community, you know, we're the 4th largest port in the United States, and have continued to be over the last decade the fastest growing port in America. You know, you don't think Savannah, Georgia, and think a port larger than Seattle, Washington, but in fact we're much larger, and we have opportunities here where people can go from underemployment to $25 an hour to jobs at our port within certain, you know, paradigms where you're looking at 6 figures, okay, with some very basic training. So we've also implemented virtual reality forklift simulators where we can help people get this really, you know, forklift operation is a gateway into so many other opportunities. And so we're building a system here using VR where we can help people get access to these entry-level, well-paying positions, but really show them a whole career path. So it's exciting. We are working with 12 other colleges across the state of Georgia. We have VR headsets in South Georgia, West Georgia, Atlanta area, Augusta, Athens. It is really exciting, and we're changing the face of education in Georgia and changing the way students learn. It's a lot of fun.
So let me ask you, let's backtrack for a second. So I know, Anthony, you and I were talking about, you know, one of the things we want to get at right now is the leadership question. And it sounds like, as you can see, you know, Brent is quite the leader during a pandemic. And you're doing all this VR stuff during a pandemic. So I guess one of the questions I know Anthony and I were curious about was, like, what do you, if you look back at these last 2 years, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges that you've faced both as an adult education and a workforce development provider? Mm-hmm. Let's just start with that. Let's just, what do you, and you could answer both from your own perspective and also, if you want, take a stab at what your students are challenged as well. It'd be great to hear.
You know, I think we took, you know, when the pandemic hit, no one anticipated that. 2019, it was a tight labor market. We were already seeing companies turning to adult education as a real viable option, a viable option for underutilized, undertapped talent. And then the pandemic hit, and we didn't know if we were going to be in 2008 again with massive joblessness. But one of the things that we focused on within our adult education family, with the entire in my entire division, is really just taking care of people, right? So kind of phase one was, hey, let's make sure people are doing okay. And we all know that the pandemic, any kind of major economic disruption, has a disproportionate effect on the adult education community. And this was no different. The second thing that we saw was that quickly our most essential workers were getting back to work, and that included a lot of people in our population who were willing to, while we were maybe working from home, making sure that those items were delivered, making sure things inside of warehouses were moving, the entire world of logistics, which makes the magic of clicking one button and getting it in 2 days. So we saw that, and then internally from an educational perspective, we said, okay, a lot of the things that we thought we were going to do, we can't do. And then what we also saw from a technology standpoint is that, you know, this kind of, even the dynamic we're having right now where we're talking virtually, it's very natural feeling. Like, we didn't do online classes like this. synchronous virtual online classes was something talked about as kind of an addendum to your asynchronous models, kind of work at your own pace. And we had tried things before, but the pandemic made us say, okay, we've got to do it now. This is our only option. So because it was our only option in adult education, we got a lot better at virtual training, virtual environments like this. But then the second piece was, hey, a lot of the activity we normally do around training had to stop. So what are we going to do with that time? Let's figure out how to get better. So for us, we wrote an innovation grant. We were one of 13 institutions awarded a Strengthening Community College U.S. Department of Labor grant. And this is really to give our system office a lot of credit, a lot of vision, as well as the entire system. So this grant really is about three things. It's about, implementing a micro-credentialing badger system, but also this VR training and also just online in general, really building that out, building out the kind of learning experience our students have. But the third is employer engagement. So increasing that across the state with internships, paid apprenticeships, all of those types of things, really focusing intentionally. And for us, IT, healthcare, and manufacturing. So it sounds like I'm talking about a grant. You said, well, what does this have to do with leadership? It's precisely, we took this downtime, said, we've got time to write grants. Let's write grants. So we wrote that grant, we won. Then we turned around and wrote a Pathways Home grant. And we were one of only 2 colleges in the United States, many institutions, but only 2 colleges, to get $4 million to train returning citizens. And we decided to really level in some of that VR work. And think about that. Here you have a population, by definition, they can't go anywhere. We're giving them this portal into another world. We're giving them hope. And so I think it's that leadership of, let's take this opportunity to get new resources, to do things we've been talking about for years, and to come out of the pandemic saying, we've been listening to employers. You can't find people. We've been listening to students. We need you to do this differently. And well, let's not certainly come out of the pandemic doing the same thing. And so that's precisely where we find ourselves now. Is just, it's not business as usual. It's business as the new usual. And very excited about the progress we've been making and are continuing to make.
So Brent, you all are doing a lot of great things down there at Savannah Technical College, and I'm biased, of course, so I always want to know about and learn about relationships between the local college system and the Workforce Development Board. But can you talk a little bit about your partnership with the Workforce Board or other American Job Center partners that have been really, I guess, pivotal to help you all kind of achieve some of your objectives during the pandemic?
Well, I want to tell you right now. So we have a tremendous partnership with our local Workforce Investment Board, or WorkSource Coastal, the Job Center operators. They are working with us on all of the projects, have supported us on all of the projects. In fact, so we're using the headsets also. We launched the largest ever first cohort of Heroes Make America, where we're training transitioning soldiers. We have the largest cohort ever, the most women ever. We're not even halfway into the program when we had the first graduate or the first student in that get a job for $82,000 a year. And so I mentioned that because WorkSource Coastal, our WIB partner, okay, our WIOA partner, is funding that class. Our Fast Track Manufacturing pilot with the VR funded that class. When we came to them and said, look, there's more cost with the VR, more time. We traditionally did this logistics class this way. It's going to cost us more. They got together and approved the additional cost. It was already very affordable. It was certainly within, I don't want to start using a lot of our internal lingo. It was an ETPL approved program. It was certainly within the ITA max, certainly well below like any kind of ITA maximum. And that's individual training account for those of you who are wondering what I just said. But the point is, and by saying all this, Anthony, you're like, obviously you guys work a lot together because you know all our lingo, but we really do. All the way down to opportunities where right now we're getting ready to do a partnership between us and the city, where we've got all these logistics projects here. We're going to really massively ramp up and use automation to create more forklift training, fast track forklift training. And while it's not a WIOA funded class, they're going to be there to provide that back end case management and supports. And they've just been a tremendous partner. They worked with us in the first pilot, as mentioned, with VR, 18-year-olds, walked them through the process, got them in that adult program, adult services program, instead of youth. It was just a perfect fit. And but also all the way up to the state level, we have an amazing deputy commissioner in Georgia, Karen Kirchler, who's over WorkSource Georgia, and she does a really amazing job. And here's something cool. She came out of Adult Ed. We met 9 years ago. We were both deans of adult education, or she was the vice president. We were both leading adult education programs. So she has that compassion at a state level leadership to understand what adult ed is all about, and continues to support and make investments in that community. Because I going back to this idea of, okay, industry, 5, 6 years ago, if you went to them and said, hey, people that have a high school diploma, people struggling with English, returning citizens, veterans, people with disabilities, people from traditionally underserved communities, yeah, okay, maybe 7 years ago. Fast forward to today, they're very dialed in, and this ties into. I want to also just mention this. This ties into economic development. So when a community is selling itself for business growth, for new businesses coming in, having these types of synergies is a part of telling a story about a community investing in its local workforce. And the number one issue for a new business when they're deciding if they're going to come to a location is workforce. It's nothing else. Number one, do you have the workforce? And so when you can tell a story, and we've had literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in announcements here in this community over the last just few years. These companies are coming here because part of the story we can tell is this healthy workforce system interacting with a healthy two-year college system focused on technical education and adult education. So it's so important.
One of the things that Anthony, when we're talking, right, we kind of think a lot about, because here, although there's a lot of overlap. I mean, Anthony does a good bit of education. Obviously, we do some workforce development, but we try to also kind of respect the expertise and push the bulk of the workforce development to Anthony, right? And we're one of two of the Title II programs here in Maryland. But one of the things I think we kind of unites the work, and we definitely, I think part of the reason I love talking to Anthony, and I'm glad we're doing the podcast, right? And love talking to people like you, Brent, is we see the work ultimately tying to these questions that are going around right now, rightly so, about equity, right? So, and obviously there's different ways to get to a just society, right? We need our protesters, we need our folks getting out there and advocates doing that work, lawyers, and all that. We also need educators and workforce development people to get behind it and think about how their work ties in. And I know I've heard you, Brent, talk a number of times about immigrants, people who are coming from disadvantaged and disconnected communities, that you've kind of said it's not, you can't just wait for them to, we have to go to them. We have to serve them. We can't just put them off. And I guess I just kind of want to know, like, from your standpoint, like, how do you see your work connecting to these calls for social and racial equity? How does it all tie together in your mind?
So we sat down as an economic development team. Listen, we've got on that team, we've got a continuing education manager. We've got a driver safety program. I mean, I've got a defects coordinator. I've got someone who runs a 40-county child care, quality child care technical assistance program. I've got our director who's running the returning citizens program, a dean of adult education. This is a very diverse team. And we sat down and said, what we want to develop our 3 wildly important goals. What if we get this right, everything else will be right? And so one of our wildly important goals was we want more underserved people to earn industry recognized credentials that connect them to jobs. Because we thought to ourselves, if we build it for the hardest to reach, the people who can reach it the easiest will be able to get it too. So we're not excluding anyone. It's just like, hey, if I want to get, if I acknowledge that it's these communities, these populations have had a hard time accessing services, accessing education. So for us, take the returning citizen population. We as a state have been very progressive since I've been here in criminal justice reform, and particularly around how we treat returning citizens. I was actually on Nathan Deal, the former governor's original task force, for kind of thinking through this. But 8 years of conversations and a lot of goodwill from Department of Community Supervision, Department of Corrections, the police, the homeless, the homeless authority, all kinds of agencies, different people working on this. And so when we sat down to write this grant for returning citizens, we know for example, our community has, Georgia already is super high on incarcerated individuals. Savannah has the most per capita returning citizens of any county in Georgia. We know that this is disproportionately African American. So a concrete way that we can get involved is build the team that we did: a director, 4 full-time case managers, and 3 full-time technical occupational instructors to mentor, coach, support. But as my director said, to kick some proverbial doors down, to walk into industry and business and educate them about the opportunity of our brothers and sisters returning from prison and how they've paid their debt to society, but they have shown resilience in getting educated. Let me give you a concrete story. One of our case managers is a returning citizen himself. So we're not just talking about it, we're living it out. 20-some years ago, he got caught up, was incarcerated for a felony, got out, got his life together, had some opportunity, has a master's in social work, and he was already a community advocate for this population, so he works on our team now. We had a group of 25 individuals. So think about this. It had been long time practice for a number of reasons to not put people in the last year of their sentence within a few counties of where they had where they committed the crime, where their conviction was. So the impact was, though, if you provided those kind of like education and connecting transitional services, it was really hard to connect someone to an employer 5-6 counties away, 6 hours away, while you were providing direct services. So Georgia Department of Corrections, give them all the credit. They said, look, we believe so much in what you want to do. We will put our brothers, mostly our brothers, right back in their home county, right? So they came in, we had a fresh group of guys, 25, and our man, he was our case manager, he was talking to him, and he said, you can develop this ambivalence. You can develop this kind of, things have not worked out for me, and he saw that in them. But he began to sit down and tell them about the program, what we were going to do, how we were going to support them for a year after they leave the prison, how we were going to provide them financial education, legal help, work on their vital documents, that we had an entire team focused on education, health, housing, all of these pieces. And he said you could just see in the middle of the conversation their whole paradigm shift from one of ambivalence about their life to one about agency. I think, too, I think that's an amazing story, and I'm so proud of Mr. Green and the entire team and the work they're doing, Mr. Betterson, Carl, but I'll tell you, I think, though, so that's one area. But I think, too, like our ESL population, we are partnered with our local refugee resettlement organization, and this community has recently been massively impacted by the Afghan population. We are resettling. We already had an existing population of Afghanis, and so with this new wave of immigration, and we are right now as a team planning workforce solutions to move these people quickly into in adult education. Some of you guys know about IET, or integrated education and training. So we've built many of these programs that we're building for those populations to link, important services. And then just last week, we were in a rural area where we met with all kinds of community leaders, child care providers, mayors, and we brought our VR headsets. We got people excited, and we talked about the jobs. I just left a meeting with a CEO, said, I want to hire 15 people. If they come out of your program, we're going to pay them $18 an hour with full benefits immediately. And this is a rural community that just doesn't believe they have opportunity. It's a community that just, even though there's these jobs sitting like 5 miles from where they live, there's just this disconnect. So we're partnering with a local school system to build innovative training, like between where they live and where these jobs are. And so, I think it's just, each of those rural communities that have really been alienated, really hurt through the pandemic, our refugee communities, or returning citizens. I think, for us, this ties into that wildly important goal of we want to make sure the people that need it the most get it. And if we do that, it's kind of like thinking, if I can sell to my hardest customer, all the other customers will be easy. And that's what we're focused on.
So I think that's super that you all hired a returning citizen to serve returning citizens. I think that's a philosophy that should be adopted more often. I think throughout the nation. And you all are doing great work and guys have so much going on. I'm interested to hear because the people that are doing the work, the practitioners that are having sleepless nights and staying up late and responding to emails, the work lines are very blurred at this point. I'm sure we all can attest to that. So leadership looks a lot different in how you treat and ensure the mental and emotional well-being of your staff these days. I know for me, I had to let go of a lot when the pandemic hit because work it changed. You're not walking to a brick and mortar every day from 9 to 5. So to do great work, I really believe that you have to do great work in taking care of your staff, your practitioners. So interested to hear how leadership has changed for you since March 2020 and how you approach managing and leading your staff to make sure that they're okay to do all the great things that you all are doing.
Well, listen, I want to commend my team for the care. I mean, I think, like I told you, when the pandemic hit, it's been about taking care of people. And one of the things that I said maybe even 8 months ago was, no one's going to remember the spreadsheet being perfect. No one's going to remember any of that stuff. They're going to remember how you treated them. That's all they're going to remember. That's it. That's all the people remember. They'll never. Now, it doesn't mean we don't want to be excellent. No, it doesn't mean we don't want to keep driving forward. I think you have to be more intentional. We changed. So we have a weekly meeting where we get on as a leadership team, and they say one good thing from the last week. So we focus that kind of collective energy on what good is happening, and then go from there and try to say, hey, what is the thing that's going to bring you the most joy this week if it gets accomplished? And so that gets them focused on the positive thing they're going to accomplish. It also helps me understand their priorities and where we need to be focusing our resources as a team. And then really coaching your individual leaders to care, continuing to set that example of, at the end of the day, family is going to be the most important, your life, your health. And so when you're trying to accomplish big goals and you're trying to push and do good things, you need healthy people, right? And but if you do, I'll tell you though, having big goals, you can get lost in doing good work, and it can be fun. And it is fun when you're not just doing the same old. And I think it's incumbent upon leaders. I like to think, I have a mentor that says, persistence is omnipotent. He's a mentor of mine, and just showing up every day and being persistent to move the little balls, keep moving them forward, keep moving little things forward. Don't go into situations. We ran this program with the veterans. We spent 8 months planning it, and I told everyone before. Everyone was all nervous. I said, "There's going to be problems. Don't worry about it." Just remind people that no matter what, things aren't going to go perfectly. And acknowledge too, one of the things that I've said that I think has been helpful. I think as leaders, we have to acknowledge the unprocessed stress of this pandemic and the undermeasured misery. Alienation takes a toll that we're not talking about. We see it measured by people who sadly take their lives. We see it measured by people who abuse drugs. We see it measured by increased violence, but we don't see the personal struggle, right? We don't measure that. We don't know what that is. So I think as leaders, I think sometimes you just got to say it out loud so that people at least know that you're thinking about them. Like, hey, and then when they ask, I'm kind of a concrete person. I'm like, hey, if people need time off, give them time off. If people, just be a good human being. There you go.
Yeah. So, so following up on that, because I think one of the things you're mentioning here is one of the antidotes I find, right, with during COVID is trying to find community. And one of the things I think you do really well, and I would love to you share, because our listeners, some of them are going to be admins, like who run programs. One of the things that I think you've done really well, Savannah, is like almost like deputize these community centers as like little mini campuses, like taking the educational opportunities, which I think is kind of unusual for someone who works at the college level. I'm sure some of my college brothers and sisters would disagree, but I find a lot of them are like classes. We run a lot of classes day and night, but in the end, it's always like, come to us. But you're kind of like running stuff in these communities, taking it to them. And I'm just kind of curious if you could talk about that, especially during the pandemic. Did that keep going, or is that going to start up again, or have you kept, I mean, how is it all working? And maybe tell us something about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. I think one of the most painful things in the pandemic was all of this community sites really getting closed down. Every state's really been different. Our two states have been very different, I think, in the approach to the pandemic. So we've been more open than a lot of places. Georgia has. So we've been back in person with a lot of different services for a while. We've certainly learned how to do something in person and in virtual. You can come to some of our classrooms and see 6 people in the room and 8 people on the screen doing a live class, and that's pretty common because there is that need for community. There is that need. We're physical, right? There is that need for presence. I know that people kind of feel like I'm exhausted looking at the screen, and there's a reason why. If you're looking at your screen, you can see your head right now. That's not normal when you're talking to someone to see yourself, and to look at white light all the time, kind of backlights. So those are challenges. But yeah, so let me kind of explain like a philosophy. For me personally, I think I shared a little bit, coming from a small little government, when I was young, we were poor enough for the government to build us a little $25,000 block house. And, growing up in that neighborhood, I really look back and think how it built empathy in me for people who were coming from challenging backgrounds. I think also, even in my own family, I'm the first person to go to college in my family. So looking in that broader family, seeing people struggle and knowing how 1 mile can be a million miles. 2 miles can be infinity, So how can I look across our city? And it's actually something I'm working on right now. So we have a vision for virtual reality on-demand training across the entire city, across the entire community. I want people to wake up on Monday, go down to one of these community-based sites, may it be a Goodwill, a library, with this place called the Empowerment Center, where it's a partnership between our hospital system, one of our state legislatures, Carl Gilliard, and also now Goodwill, and thinking about being able to put on demand where someone can, hey, I'm ready to go now. Let's get the training to them right now. So I think that outward focus really comes from that belief that just, again, for many people, 1 mile is a million miles. And if that's the case, and going back to that, well, what are we here for? Well, I've got to get education to where people need it most, who can impact their lives. And in adult education, people that are lacking basic skills, who are behind, who've dropped out in the 7th grade, dropped out in the 10th grade, whatever that might be, or who are second language learners, these are the people that are chronically unemployed, chronically underemployed, chronically impacted by major shifts in the economy, like the pandemic. So if we move the needle in these communities, we actually move the underlying structure of poverty, cyclical poverty, all of these issues, right? We've actually now tapped into not the low-hanging fruit up at the top that's easy, but the stuff that kind of is resistant to major turns in the economy and kind of keeps those chronic issues there. So if we can impact that community, it's harder work. It's not the low-hanging fruit. It's harder work. And so that's getting that access. That's, if they could drive there, if they could do it, they'd probably be such, if you kind of think about it this way, if they had the means to get to you on a consistent basis, that already tells you something about their economic life, where they are. So if they can't get to you, by definition, there's someone who needs it the most. So that's kind of the impetus for getting out in the community is for us, it's very practical. It's very much grounded in the idea that people, you need to reach them where they are right now, build them up, give them enough skills to change their economic situation, and then put them in a pathway where, we're not going to be able to put $7 million worth of equipment all over the community in each location, but we can put the right type of investment and the right type of opportunity to connect you to coming to our aviation training center, okay, and getting all world training and go make $80,000 a year at one of the largest aerospace manufacturers in the United States right across the street. So that's not maybe where you're going to start if you're in a government housing community, right? You might need to start with an employer that's closer, build up those skills, and then make your way over. So.
Yeah, I love the pop-up training model. So Brent, don't be surprised if we try to do something similar up here, but I promise.
Good, please. I mean, look, anything think about the idea that, people come into our one-stops, right? And we say, hey, and we do this as a college, and it's fine, but, hey, well, class starts next week, or class starts in 3 weeks, or class starts in 4 weeks. It's like, we know right now that with certain types of technology, we could start you immediately. And within 2 or 3 days, when you would have just been waiting, you now have the type of skills that a manufacturer in our community would say, we're ready to go. We're ready to go. We're going to hire that person. And you want to catch them in that, that Kairos moment, that moment where where time for them kind of stops. They're focused on it, because the moment they walk out of your center, there's a lot of opportunity. I'm curious, about your job centers. How have you guys been, Anthony, kind of coming back from this, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I guess not to answer a question with a question, but I think that's related to kind of the whole digital divide issue that's really came to the forefront as a result of the pandemic. Make training convenient and make it available right away. And I think one of the things that we've been doing is that we're changing our model. We have, I think, beautiful American job centers with partners and all of the resources in the world, but we have a large county, and we know where our pockets of poverty are, where communities really need our help. So, Gabe is on our board, so we all conversed and planned. We purchased a mobile job center that will, deploy, and it'll be in communities where communities of need 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, signing people up, marketing awareness of programs, and actually offering services, hard skills, soft skills, job fairs, and so forth. So it's not an end, but it's a means to kind of combat the digital divide, and it's how we're transforming our job centers. We'd like to move away from your traditional brick and mortar in such a large county and go mobile and bring services to communities that need our help. So I hope that answers your question, but I was interested to know about what the digital divide looks like in Savannah and how you all are kind of trying to bridge that gap, because it's an issue everywhere, but it presents itself in different manners in each different state, jurisdiction, or whatnot.
I think that the digital divide is certainly real. I know that we are making a lot of investment as a state and as a community in broadband access, really building out that infrastructure as a system. We're also building out the training. We have the training to get people certified to do the work, to get that infrastructure in place. I also think that, the pandemic hurt and helped. I mean, it pushed us all online. The people's kids were pushed into online situations, learning situations. So those resources kind of extended to parents. But we're building. We've built in our first year of this innovation grant. We built 21 self-paced learning modules that we're imagining can be accessed a variety of ways, but they're built on Articulate 360, which is kind of an industry standard, but it means it's just really, really light on data and mobile friendly. So we're thinking about, while the digital divide exists, and we do want to continue to provide training opportunities that are in person, we are recognizing that I think the pandemic has actually has pushed more tools into more people's hands, and people have gotten used to doing a lot of things online. and students that for years would have never imagined. But I think my last thought on the topic is just we've in adult ed in particular really pushed getting back in person, because we have seen a drop off in the effectiveness of the education. Because you are dealing with a population that's struggled, sometimes at no fault of their own, but sometimes they were just they've had a hard time staying focused with studying, or they've tried it, quit, and they may not have a good learning. One of the things we all assumed is that everyone's got a space in their home. They might not have a space in their home that's peaceful for learning. So I think I love this. By the way, I'm stealing the pop-up thing. You said you're stealing something. I'm stealing this pop-up job center. I'm taking it to Sharon Morgan, our executive director, and saying we need to do what Baltimore's doing. It sounds phenomenal. But in terms of what we're doing, we are recognizing that there's kind of an asymptote, kind of a limit to what can be done digitally for everyone, and kind of imagining, we want to continue to be flexible, but as soon as we can get back to all the community sites, and we have launched in some new community sites, that to me is the access point, right? Like, do they have a place they can easily walk to or bike to get the education that's going to start them on the path? And I think that will continue to remain an important part of education, because, as I mentioned, just there's a screen fatigue. We're talking about all of those types of things, and it can be true for all those for our adult students as well.
So listen, to wrap things up, I guess I want to go all over the place in a great way, I think. And I think that's a testament to all of many things you do and how you think through things. You're a leader and a really big thinker as well. But just to kind of maybe take it another way, you need a lot of heart to do this job as well. You can't just have the intellect, right? And I guess I'm just like kind of on a personal level. And this is, again, that's, I think, geared towards audiences who might be showing up for this podcast, who are doing the same work. They're looking for inspiration, not only to come up with ideas, but just to keep going. So I guess I'm just kind of, what do you say to those folks? What keeps you going? What keeps you facing these difficult challenges day in and day out for the folks you serve?
Yeah, so I like to answer that question on two levels. I think we all, the moment you discover in your life who you are here to help, you discover your why. And so as leaders, you've got to continually confront the who. You've got to continually engage with the who. Get out of your office, get out of your building, go to the community, listen to what's actually going on, understand the complexities of the problem. Let me give you an example with returning citizens. Imagine a young man, and this is a story that I heard. Imagine a young man who was living with his mother, who was being abused along with him by a boyfriend. And one day this 18-year-old had enough and struck the man in the head. The man fell down and died. And this young man went to prison for manslaughter, a felony. When he gets out, he's got the F word on him, felon. And, in times past, when there was tons of people for jobs, companies would be, we just don't hire that. We don't do that, or for this person killed someone. But when you take the time to learn that story, that here's the backstory, all of a sudden you realize where you can get the energy for the advocacy, where you can get the energy for doing the work, is like, okay, well, this is an injustice. Like, I would do the same thing. Like, so would you, if you're a good person, right? You'd say, stop striking my mother. And so I think that engaging our learners in their story, understanding their challenges, when we talk about the obstacles or roadblocks, lean into that. Make sure you really understand it. I think one of the challenges, it's a challenge for anyone, right? It's a challenge for the person you walk to in a grocery store and they look like they're bored. It's because they've stopped paying attention to the people in front of them and they just see them as another one like that person. But what you realize is that you meet another, you go to the register and there's a person there and she's smiling or he's smiling and happy, and you realize, and the way they interact with you like you are a unique person with a unique story, and I can learn from that person. So, I'd encourage those who are in the work to say, don't let people become numbers. Don't think in types. Don't think in categories. Think as I have a unique person in front of me, and how can I really listen to their story, what's happening. Yeah, we talk broadly about demographics. We can talk about socioeconomics. We can talk about access to education or pre-existing access to education. We can talk about health issues, homelessness, all of these things. But the moment you stop listening to the student in front of you is the moment you really lose your superpower for motivation. Because it's in each of those stories for me, that is totally it. In each individual story, when I need to get motivated, I think about the young lady this summer. We ran a welding program for GED students. And I went out to this welding lab. It was a mobile welding lab. And there was a young lady there. Well, I asked the instructor, and he asked me a question. He goes, who do you think is the best welder here? I said, I'm not going to bite on that. And he says, and he pointed down, and it wasn't the man with gray in his beard. It wasn't this person or that. It was an 85-pound, 19-year-old African-American female who was maybe 5 foot tall. And it was in that moment I went, oh, we don't sort right. Because I don't know anybody. Okay, I'm not going to pretend I'm like someone I don't know anybody that thinks, oh, who's the best welder? Oh, I'm definitely going to look for all the 5 foot tall, 85-pound African-American high school high school dropout female. That's not what's in my head. And it made me realize that we've got work to do. That we've got work to do to make sure we give people access to the education that corresponds with their gifts. And we've got to make sure that employers aren't looking with outdated models of the world and are actually paying attention to the people in front of them and the talents and potential that they have. So, I share that story because it's very moving to me, because it's a story I share with businesses all the time and share with people in the community, because it crystallizes this idea that when you go out and you get close, you get remotivated, you get re-engaged, and that's what drives the change, right? That's when you're out here saying, hey, why do we need to do this? Because there's still work to be done, and there's still lives that need to be changed. And maybe that sounds a little, easy, a little too Christmas cardish. I don't know. I really don't care. It's like, that's the truth. The reason why you tear up when you read the card is because there's truth there. And I think the truth is get out there, get engaged, get with students, stay motivated, listen to their stories. And so many people are doing so much good work. I mean, I know we're talking, Gabe, you do amazing work. Anthony, sounds like you guys are really innovating. I mean, it's exactly your stories that both of you, I think you're doing the innovative things you're doing for precisely this reason that I just said, is that you've spent time listening. You've heard what students' needs are. You've heard that your community can't access the job center. We need to create a pop-up job center. That's powerful, right? And it wasn't because you really listened. Somebody got your attention, and then you started to measure differently. And then you started to realize, hey, we've got to do something differently. And that's exciting. So commend you both for that.
Well, we commend you, my friend. I don't want to talk for Anthony, but I know I do. I'm sure you might as well. And I love hearing your story, by the way. That was a very nice story to hear. So thank you very much for sharing. I think it's a fantastic way to start our lovely partnership here, you and me, Anthony. This is the Bridging the Gap podcast, BTG Pod. So we will come out every 2 weeks. We will be figuring out the publishing cycle when we come. It'll be Fridays, it looks like. That's what we're looking at. So stay tuned. If you like this, come back in 2 weeks. We'll have another episode. Folks, my name is Gabe Martinez Cabrera. I'm the executive director of LCMC. Our guest today was Dr. Brent Stubbs from Savannah Tech. And my friend here who co-hosts this lovely podcast. Got any last thoughts for us? Take us home.
No, this was amazing. We could sit here and do this for hours, but I think this is all that stands between us and our weekend. Brent, it was great talking to you, and I'm sure we'll connect offline, but this was amazing.
Stay tuned, folks. Come back. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks again.